Alright, I got a great question from somebody that I wanted to answer. You said, what's the difference between Jeet Kune and Freddy's Modern Kung Fu? So Jeet Kune is created by Bruce Lee, or was created by Bruce Lee. Freddy's Modern Kung Fu is created by me. And Bruce Lee has been a huge inspiration towards my own creation. But there will obviously be differences, and there will be similarities. Some similarities is, both me and Bruce, for one, we both have the same last name. My last name's Lee, his last name's Lee. He immigrated from Hong Kong. My roots come from Hong Kong. My parents are from Hong Kong. He's Cantonese, Chinese. I'm Cantonese, Chinese. He was very fluent with the Chinese language. I'm not. So that's one difference. He could read and write it, and he's very fluid with it. I'm not. Um, he was born in America, I think San Francisco. I was born in America. I was born in Chicago. He spent about a good amount, maybe about almost half his life in Hong Kong. I've never been to Hong Kong. I've never been to China. So I spent my whole life over here in the United States. So I'm a lot more Americanized than Bruce Lee. But as far as the style is concerned, the expression, the spiritual grounding of Bruce's work, if you do your research, you'll see that a lot of his teachings go off of Buddha. They go off of Tao, the Lao Tzu, and a big part of his expression is from J. Krishnamurti. Mine is Tao, Buddha, and Osho. I favor Osho over J. Krishnamurti. I'm not sure. I don't think Bruce Lee even knew about Osho during that time, but his favorite sage was J. Krishnamurti. I've read some of J. Krishnamurti's teachings, being introduced by Bruce. I really do like J. Krishnamurti, but I like Osho much more. If Osho wasn't in existence, then I'd probably still be a follower of J. Krishnamurti. But I favor Osho over J. Krishnamurti, so that's one clear difference. Um, Bruce Lee also was more speed based. He put a lot of his emphasis on speed. My emphasis is more on balance between strength and speed. I'm not all about the speed. Bruce Lee would sacrifice so much for that extra speed. So you see that Bruce Lee was 5'7.5", and when he died, he only weighed 125 pounds. As for myself, I'm shorter than Bruce Lee, and I'm weighing about 145 pounds, and I'm more strength. I focus on both, but I think my body type, my preferences is I like the strength, you know. Um, so Bruce is more about speed. Bruce started off with the Wing Chun Kung Fu, which is basically a lot of it is speed. A lot of it is speed, straight line attacking, and you can see that in his expression. A lot of it is speed focused. But as far as me, um, I did train a little bit of the Wing Chun, but then I focused mainly on the Chole Phut, because I learned from my father and the son. My main teacher was the father who taught me the Chole Phut style, and then his son was the one who focused a lot on the Wing Chun style. But my main focus was the Chole Phut. The Chole Phut was a lot more stability and groundedness. So Chole Phut's more like football, or compared to maybe Muay Thai, or maybe compared to um, something like a power lifter. Chole Phut is more grounded, a lot of low stances, a lot of power, a lot of strength. Wing Chun is more like dancing, kind of like a Mayweather, kind of like a Muhammad Ali, a lot of jump roping, kind of like quick on your feet, very much speed focus. So you can see in Bruce Lee's, expression, you'd always see him expressing in his movies the amazing amount of speed that he had. But you notice in my expression, a lot of mine is expression of like strength, like me demonstrating, how many, push-ups I could do, how many pull-ups, how many bench press and barbell squat, just to show, like, clearly, like, raw strength, like how much I could do, which gives you an accurate gauge of where I'm at. But with speed is concerned, it's really hard to assess speed, because you could, you could have people run side by side, like in the 100-meter dash, and then you could see who's faster, but it's only relative to the person that they're running next to. If the other person's running fast just like you, then you don't look that fast. But if they're really slow, and then you're running next to them and you're really fast, then you're gonna look a lot faster than you are. But what's even more difficult to assess is hand speed, or even kicking speed, like how fast somebody could actually punch, how fast somebody could actually kick, and that's something that's really almost hard to measure. It's all visual, and nowadays with technology, people mimic with the technology to make it seem like they're faster than they really are, but back then in Bruce's time, there wasn't that type of technology, so it was like the real speed that he was able to do. And that's just something that you visually see, but it's hard to assess and gauge. It's hard to say if anybody was actually faster than Bruce. It's hard to say if Mayweather was actually faster than Bruce with his hands. It's hard to say whether or not Muhammad Ali was faster than Bruce with his hands, you know. But with strength is more easily gauged, Max bench press for your weight is max bench press for your weight. Max pull-ups with good form is your max pull-ups with good form. Max barbell squat is your max barbell squat. So if you put somebody like Bruce Lee and he could only bench press like 200 pounds, and you got somebody else who could bench press like 300 pounds, then you know who's stronger. And then you compare like, pound for pound, who's stronger pound for pound. You could do that as well. It's an easy comparison when it comes to strength. But when it comes to speed, it's not that easy. And Bruce was the type of person who focused a lot on that type of speed, and you don't really see him. That's another thing. You don't see him expressing himself too much when it comes to showing how strong he actually is. You don't see Bruce Lee making videos showing him doing like a one-arm pull-up. But you do see videos of him doing like a two-finger push-up. But you don't see him bench pressing. You don't see him doing pull-ups. You don't see him, holding the L hold to see how long he could hold it. You don't see him doing a lot of different things. He leaves a lot of things up for guesswork. But as far as me is concerned, I put everything out there and what I could do at what time. At the age of 28, what I could do. At the age of 21, what I could do. At the age of 30, at the age of 32, age of 34. As I'm progressing, I'm showing what I'm capable of doing at that moment. But Bruce Lee was more about keeping things more hidden, more secretive. He didn't want people to compare themselves to what he could do. So that's one thing that I noticed about Bruce. As far as the techniques are concerned, honestly, a lot of my techniques I've learned from Bruce as far as like the science of the combat is concerned and what is actually very effective for sparring. It's a science. So once you learn the science and you understand the science, you stick to it, and that's how you gain that advantage. And I've read all his books, and his stuff is really on point. Like, that is the science. That is the stuff that really works, and that's what I express as well when I spar, and it really does work. And I noticed that somebody like Mayweather uses the same science that Bruce would use. I don't know if Mayweather actually studied Bruce Lee stuff, but the same stuff that Bruce does is the same stuff that Mayweather does. It's the same stuff that I do. It's the science behind the combat, and that's what I train in. So in that respect, me and Bruce are very similar. If anything, I'm an extension of Bruce Lee's teachings because he discovered it first and put it out there in the public. And then I would learn from him and then basically just re-express the same thing, but in my own unique way. But that science, I have that science, that understanding, and in that terms we're really, really similar. It's just that he's really focused a lot on the speed. As far as me, I got speed, but I don't have as much speed as Bruce. But I could pretty much guarantee you I have more strength than what Bruce had back in the past. Guaranteed. For one, I'm 20 pounds more. I weigh 20 more pounds more than Bruce. And for two, there's no way that Bruce was able to lift as much weight that I could lift, for my size. I know he's strong pound for pound, but I am as well. But I know for a fact his speed is on top of it. And that's what it is. You sacrifice strength for speed. And Bruce Lee sacrificed a lot of strength for the speed. As for myself, I like to keep it more balanced. I like to be strong, and I like to be flexible as well. As far as Bruce Lee is concerned, another difference is that I have integrated firearms into my training, and that's part of the modernization of what I do. A lot of my training is alive, according to it changes according to what the law will allow. So the law basically says that concealed carry is allowed, at least where I live. So that clearly became a part of my training as far as the firearms is concerned. I'm introducing the firearms to my students. I'm introducing it into the whole curriculum of what we do. And we go to the firing range. We learn firearm tactics, not just with the handguns, but we got modern guns with semi-automatics. We use Glocks and things like that. And we also, I recently have been integrating the AR-15 training into what we do. So we got the AR-15, we got the Glocks, we got the semi-automatics. Back in Bruce's time, I don't even sure if they even had semi-automatics. They mainly just had revolvers. They definitely didn't have Glocks back then, and they didn't have the AR-15s the way that we have now. They might have just had shotguns, and they might have just had revolvers. But now the technology has changed to be something a lot more effective and efficient, and a lot more people out there nowadays are using guns, carrying guns, than they did in the past. So my art is adapting to the modernization of survival. So a lot of my training is keeping in mind the use of the firearms as a way of self-protection. So that changes a lot of things within the dynamics of how we train and how we think when it comes to preparing for a violent encounter. Another thing is a lot of my art is focused on meditation. A lot of meditation training as far as like the outlook on life, the outlook of the combat situation, learning to be less competitive, less egoistic, being more compassionate, being more loving, and just kind of like being less involved in this combative game. Bruce Lee, from books that I've read, they mentioned that he kept the meditation training to himself. He would do sitting meditation by himself, and his students wouldn't even be involved in it. They just see him sitting by himself, by the lake or whatever the case may be, and nobody knew what he was doing. He was doing the meditation on his own, and he wasn't really sharing that with his students. That wasn't really a part of his teaching curriculum. A lot of it was just basically focused on a lot of basically strategy and tactics for combat, but he wasn't really sharing the meditation with his students. But I share that training with my students all the time. We do meditation once a week, and constantly through our interaction they learn about being more compassionate, being more loving, being more humble. And you see a lot of my videos on YouTube, a lot of it is just geared on Eastern philosophy and meditation and wisdom. But with Bruce Lee, a lot of it is tactics, and that's why a lot of people from the combat sport would take his techniques and just use it for combat sport, and then they would associate his teachings to cage fighting and MMA. But the same thing, what I do notice, this is really clear, and people have been doing the same thing with Tupac. They'd be taking his lyrics and then putting it with, Adele, and making, a song with her about, hello or something like that. So it's like a softer song. And then they take his lyrics and then make it with somebody with like Eminem, which would be like really like a rough and aggressive. So Tupac's music was able to, his lyrics were used for softer and harder. So basically Bruce Lee's teachings were used for harder, which is for like with the cage fighting, and is used for softer for somebody like me, which is basically more of an artistic approach. So basically I noticed that Bruce's teachings are really much focused a lot on the combat. Mine is focused on a balance of the fitness, combat, and spirituality. But Bruce Lee publicized his combat. He didn't want to. He didn't publish any books when he was living, but his combat techniques ended up being published after he died. But as far as me concerned, my expression, I'm keeping my combat secretive, and that's not going to be published because there's nothing on record as far as like me teaching it. Everything is off camera as far as me teaching it. There's me expressing it, but there's nothing. I'm not drawing stick figures and giving directions, and this is how you do this and this is how you do that. That's what Bruce Lee did. He spent all his time doing that, and a lot of his books are technique based. But for me, none of it's going to be put in writing. It's just all verbal, and it's through person-to-person interaction. My teachings are more spiritual and meditative, and I do the fitness as well as an instructional way. Bruce Lee didn't have too much as far as fitness is concerned. he had one book out there pretty much called like The Art of Expressing the Human Body, and that was just his fitness program, which is very basic. My fitness program is a lot more comprehensive, involving a lot more different exercises, going very in depth into everything as far as like strength training, cardio training, flexibility training is concerned. So I go very in depth with the fitness. Bruce Lee went very in depth with the combat, and I'm going very in depth with the spiritual and the meditation. Bruce Lee didn't go in depth with the spiritual and the meditation with his students, or he didn't go too in depth into the movies, but he just gave a little glimpse of it. But he went very in depth with the spiritual and the meditation in his books. Okay, so Bruce Lee's more, he was more focused on combat and spiritual when it came to his books. As far as me, I'm concerned, with my YouTube expression is spiritual, meditative, and fitness. The combat, I've pretty much eliminated that instructional type of teaching to the public. So that's another clear difference. Is that I want to protect the combat training for the people that I interact with directly. I don't want to share that with the public. But the fitness is out to the public. The spiritual is out to the public. So those are some of the major differences. The weapons, I use all the weapons that Bruce would use, the nunchucks, the batons, the sticks, the bow staff. I train with those as well. The only difference is I really focus on the firearms, which Bruce did not introduce that, to the people. I even focus on the sword fighting and the fencing and things like that, and that's what Bruce was focusing on as well. But his logo is definitely different than mine. His logo is just basically a yin yang with arrows showing that it changes. Mine's, it's a yin yang with a figure, which is me just punching, doing a straight punch, and then there's Chinese characters around the yin yang, around the figure, like happiness, peace, love. That's pretty much what I want people to head towards. And just keeping in mind that as you train in the combat, you need to learn, you need to remember to head towards peace and happiness and love. And it's not about competition and ego and things like that. As far as that's as far as what I noticed. Bruce's expression is also, his expression is, in a way, it could be sometimes more competitive, more ego. Like he kind of played with that energy more, and you see it in his movies. And people would always say that he was a very arrogant and cocky person. He would play with that energy. For me, I'm different. I'm more like less competitive, less egoistic, and just kind of being more humble. It's just different. But it's almost like he probably had to be that way in order to make it into the Hollywood, and express it at that level out to the public, in the forefront. I'm more focused on a lot of health and longevity. I want to live longer, and I'm not really too concerned about impressing the people around me. But as far as what I've learned from Bruce and what I see in his expression, he was, he knew that he had a lot to live up to, and I think he sacrificed his health in order to get to a certain level. And I think that's part of the reason why it cost him his life. But for me, I'm not going to take that gamble. I'm not going to take that risk. And it's just not worth it for me. I don't really care what other people think. I just want to be honest, be myself, and just express my art. And I'm not looking to be rich and famous. But Bruce Lee was clearly looking to be famous and rich. When he was younger, as a child, he told his parents, he said, I want to be known in every household all over the world, like Coca-Cola. That was his goal. He was very ambitious. He was all about fame. He wanted to get that fame. It was very important to him. And he would even risk his life for it, which he clearly did. As for myself, I'm not going to risk it. I don't care for the fame. I'm just going to express it honestly, be myself, and just keep doing it until my time is up. I'm not gonna risk my health or anything like that. Bruce Lee was married to a Caucasian woman. I'm married to Chinese, Vietnamese, and Thai woman. So she has a lot of the Chinese blood in her. She was actually born in China as well. So my offspring, my children, are gonna be more grounded in the Chinese culture because that's where our blood is. So my children, I got 5 children, they're more grounded within the Chinese blood. But Bruce Lee, because he married a Caucasian woman, already half of the blood is gonna be Caucasian, half Chinese already. The blood is already being less pure, in a way, which basically makes it even harder to kind of hold on to the Chinese culture and the traditions and things like that. And that's something that's very clear. He had 2 kids, and then one died unexpectedly. So now he only has 1 left. As for myself, I have 5, and they're all still living. Hopefully they live long lives, so then hopefully they could carry on the teachings through their lives as well. Another thing about Bruce Lee, in his teachings, in his books, he taught down a lot on forms. He just stopped practicing forms. He stopped seeing a usefulness in forms. A lot of his teachings were geared towards sparring and practical efficiency. So he kind of took a lot of the emphasis off of forms. He pretty much was like anti-forms at that time. As for myself, I'm not anti-forms anymore. I mean, I understood him, I learned from him, and at a certain time in my life, I stopped practicing forms as well. But now being a school owner and training people and trying to get beginners to become advanced, I've learned the importance of forms, of building like camaraderie, building like a community, building like a curriculum. A form to me is like a mental book. Like, you don't need to open a book and read a book that's fixed. It's all up here. And you put the techniques all together in and organize all the techniques like chapters in a book. Where it's like you got chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5. You organize all these techniques and you present the techniques in an organized form. And that is extremely useful. So Bruce Lee might have taught down in forms, but he had movies, and the movies are fixed. The movies do not change. Those end up becoming his fixed form. So even though he taught down on forms, he ended up becoming a part of forms as well by creating the movies. Another thing is, in order to have memory, you need intelligence. In order to be a martial artist, you need intelligence. So you need to have good memory. So even though Bruce Lee taught down in forms, he still needed good memory in order to create those movies, in order to act, in order to know what to say next, which line, what comes up, what after next. Make all these choreographed fights with Chuck Norris, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Danny Insano, and all these other martial artists. He needed to remember which moves were next. He had to create something fixed in order to present it in film. So those were his forms. I've created my own forms in a way as a teaching curriculum for my students. So basically, there's like techniques that we practice that are set, and then there's levels of progression that you go up and you practice all the techniques like you're reading a book but with your body. So I see a lot of benefit in the forms, and it also just like as a teaching tool and a teaching method. So everything becomes a physical expression rather than just filming things and then just having people watch the film. No, there's no filming. You become it. You become the moving expression of that book, of the techniques, and the methods of training. Okay, so I've learned to have a great appreciation for forms, and that's a big part of my teachings as far as the combative aspect. Of course, I do have the sparring that's really important as well, which is the practical, efficient methods which Bruce highly focused on. Other things are, I filmed my training all the time. I filmed myself sparring, but you never find videos of Bruce filming himself sparring with his students. You never find it. You find him making choreographed fights, making the movies, but you don't find him just filming, his sparring sessions. I film that. I film my fitness. You don't see Bruce Lee filming his fitness training programs, you know. So there's a lot of things I bring people inside to the training to see the real training that goes on. Bruce Lee didn't really do that. He just basically would present, these presentations, these movies. He would make everything as perfect as it can be and then present it to the public. As for me, everything is just kind of raw footage of just training, like unedited, just basically just raw training, and you see it for what it is, So that's some clear differences. But Bruce Lee stopped teaching. When he went into the movies, he gave up on the teaching. He closed down all his schools. So I can understand him not really finding a useful purpose of creating forms, because he was into acting and he had to memorize things for movies, memorize his lines, memorize the fight scenes. His things was all focused on the movies. Once he's done with one movie, then he would put his energies into the next movie, and then so on and so forth. So his memory had to go towards making movies. As for me, I'm not making any movies. I'm teaching people. I'm teaching students. So my memory has to go towards developing forms to help these students better themselves, and it's a different purpose, So people will remember certain things when there's a certain purpose. So like, when you go to school and there's a test coming up, you got to remember, what is required for that certain test if you want to pass the test. So we got to work on our memory to study something, study material in order to move on to the next level, But when it comes to martial art forms, that's kind of how the traditions are kept alive, is they're kept alive by these forms, these fixed forms. And really, it's passed on through physical movement. It's not necessarily a book that you write. It's through physical movements, and that's an extremely effective and important training tool. So I took my teachings onto a physical level to share with my students. Bruce Lee put it into the film to make movies, and he also would write it down and put it into books. But I'm not gonna do that, and I'm not gonna ever do that. Bruce Lee already did that. I don't need to redo something that's already been done. If people want to learn the science of combat, then they just need to study Bruce Lee's teachings. If they want to be introduced to J. Krishnamurti, then they could be introduced to J. Krishnamurti by Bruce Lee. But there's no need for me to introduce J. Krishnamurti when Bruce Lee already introduced J. Krishnamurti. So who I'm introducing is Osho, and as far as fitness is concerned, Bruce's expression, as far as what he put out there, is very limited. There's not that much information about what type of fitness program and regiment that he put himself through in order to get to the level that he did. But as for me, I put all my fitness out there as far as the things that I do, and my training methods as far as gaining strength and flexibility and speed and endurance is concerned. So that's pretty much one of the main differences. I feel that my expression is very similar to Bruce Lee's expression, but clearly is not, Bruce Lee's expression, and it's my own expression. And it's just going to take a lot of time for me to build up a reputation, to build up an audience, to have people respect what I do. I'm not going the route of the Hollywood. That's another thing. Bruce Lee went to the route of the Hollywood. I'm not going towards that route. I'm going towards the route of YouTube. YouTube's like my only way to kind of reach out there to the public and masses, to kind of gain that reputation and respect, for the hard work that I do. So, changing times. Bruce Lee was back then, and today it's me. I'm trying to represent the martial arts the best that I can, and I hope that people out there that really care about the martial arts will put in their effort to represent it the way that it should be represented.